Hi, and welcome to Conversations for another evening. My name's Jaira. I'm one of the pastors here at Cairns Baptist. Tonight, I'm very excited. I get to interview a man by the name of Bruce Jones Walker. Well, some would know him as Bruce Walker Jones, but his actual name is Bruce Jones Walker. Tonight, we're going to be talking about his story, his testimony, how he became a Christian, and where God's taken him on a bit of a roller coaster of a life story. So can I encourage you, sit back, make some time to watch tonight, because I believe God is going to speak to you. And look, if God is talking to you, then I encourage you, please contact us. You can do so through a variety of ways. One of those is community@cairnsbaptist.org.au. That email address will get you through to any of the pastors, and someone will be in touch very shortly. Don't forget, you can also tune into what's happening in church life through the podcast on Tuesdays. You can find that on iTunes or the church website. And you can also find our entire back catalogue of conversations and, of course, our Sunday morning services. Just go to YouTube, search for Cairns Baptist, and you'll find our YouTube channel right there. If you'd like to contribute to the ministry of our church, you can do so through the Tithely app, or you can do so through the church website, or call us and you can see us in person. But let me encourage you to take a moment to sit back, pray with us, and hear what Bruce would say and what God would say through him to you tonight. Welcome back. Joining me tonight is Bruce. It is really cool. I'm looking forward to tonight. I'm looking forward to having this conversation and really seeing the heart of the man, but also his history, his past, where he's been, and where he hopes to be in the future. So, Bruce, welcome tonight.
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty warm up here under the lights, but apart from that, I'm okay.
Nice. It's a ripping vest that you're wearing. Is there a story behind the vest?
Well, I've been watching your past conversations in front of that black curtain, so I thought I better, so take this off. This is my housewear. And I thought I better splash on a bit of colour.
So you dressed up
from the
for
white.
us. Apart from the white. It's nice. I like it. Bruce, you've been part of our family here, I guess, at Cairns Baptist for a little while now.
13 months.
13 months. But your story starts, well, your association with this church goes back a number of years before that.
Yeah, I think we worked it out with Grace in 1983.
Wow. So 1983, you were here. What were you doing in this church?
I was laying those bricks. And they're still here. I'm really excited.
That's right. That Brickies apprenticeship's paid off.
That's it, yeah.
Those bricks are still there. No, that's
They look
kind of
good
exciting.
too, actually. I watch them sometimes, especially when the preaching's boring. I'll stare. I go, oh, they look good.
Just count them and remember the one that you laid dodgy and go, I can't believe it's still there.
Yeah.
So you are a Cairns boy?
Yes. Technically, no. Ipswich in southeast Queensland.
Yeah,
but apparently I moved here when I was about 9 months old.
Yeah, nice. So born and raised in Cairns,
Yes.
graduate of Cairns High alumni?
Yeah, I probably missed that one. And now they think Cairns High is really a good school. Back in my day, very different.
Really?
Oh, completely.
So mum refers to it as Cairns Penitentiary.
That's closer to the mark.
Yeah, wow.
And it was, Trinity Bay was the cool school if you wanted to get away with everything.
Yep.
And Cairns High was the strict school. And yeah, that's always been the case.
Nice. So tell me a bit, you were one of a number of kids?
Youngest of 9, but 8 living, because the eldest 2 twins, one of them died at a fairly early age. But yeah, youngest of 9.
Cool. And born into a single mum for the most part?
Single mum. I actually never met my father. So the birth certificate says they're all the same dad. And I believe that because I'm very much like my siblings, even though they've told me most of my life that I was adopted and I was a mistake. And it had validity to it because they're all 2 years apart.
Yep.
And so I'm 4 years.
Nice.
So the last one was 4 years. And I didn't have the knowledge or the ability to fight back, so I just accepted it and got prayer for it 20 years later.
Now, you had a bit of a rough childhood.
Oh, yeah, I would say the childhood that I had in the first 6 to 8 years is probably a childhood that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Violence and all forms of abuse with my siblings, as in most of us were victims. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that's something that I'm, in conversation, that's something you've carried through for a number of years until you,
Yes. I think that was one of the first, becoming a Christian way back has helped because I've spent most of my 30 odd years as a Christian in counselling or marriage counselling or some sort of learning how to counsel and then being counselled. So yeah, counselling whether I've sat there or sat here, both sides all my life basically as a Christian.
So your first foray into religion, as it were, was with the Mormon Church. I mean, how did that come about?
Well, and I'll give you set the scene. Grimshaw Street, 15 Grimshaw Street, an old Queenslander. My mum had 2 cigarette machines in the hallway because she smoked that much.
Wow.
And all the people that would come and visit the house. And she would have boarders as well downstairs for rent, collecting rent. So strange people down there. And I think at that stage, the boys back in those days, it was national service. So they were cast off to that and then stayed in the military. So all my siblings went into the army or married into the army or the Air Force. And so that sort of broke that from them. For me, my mum and my 2 younger siblings, 2 sisters, she all of a sudden woke up one day and became a Mormon. I think some missionaries knocked on the door, did whatever they do, and she decided to become a Mormon. She accepted the Mormon Jesus, and from that day forth, her life changed 180 degrees.
Yeah, sure.
And so the boyfriend stopped turning up, the strangers were got rid of. No alcohol, no tea, no coffee, no, we were allowed Milo, that was good, and all these new rules. But at the same time, it broke what was happening there, the environment, it changed.
Cool.
And we stayed there for another 4 or 5 years and then moved to Severn Street, 407 Severn Street, and spent the rest of my growing up there and left home there. I think I was in and out of home, as you do a 6-month rental, have fun, then broke, so lost your job or whatever, or in between jobs, so come back home to mum. So yeah, when I left Australia, I was living at home with my mum. There at 407 Severn Street.
Okay, cool. We're going to get back. We'll talk a little bit more about that and I guess the trip to Sydney and that changed things for you. But where you are right now, I mean, you were talking to me, we were talking late last week, and you gave me the great news that you're now on board officially with GIA.
Yes, officially.
For those that don't know, what is GIA?
Global Interaction is really the mission arm of the Baptists. So the Australian Baptists and the Queensland Baptists. My senior guy is Bob, and I can't remember his last name because we're still first name. But Bob's a lovely guy, and we're talking regularly. And so we've started the process. We've got so much to get through. I'm so excited though.
Yep. So this is for legitimate frontline missionary work.
This is full on, and the reason for this situation that I need the credibility of like the Baptists is because there's no legitimate bona fide churches in the area that we're focusing on. The NAR are in there, a lot of Pentecostal, different versions of Pentecostals, but no traditional fundamental obedient church face in there.
Now, we're allowed to talk about the country you're going to?
Pattaya.
So heading into Thailand, which is going to be...
which is the worst part of Thailand. Forgive me, Thai people. But statistically, it is. Pattaya is where the tourists don't go. Russian tourists go. Some Australians will go because it's a backpacking side. So it's on the eastern side below Bangkok, heading down where it hits Cambodia. So it's only about an hour out of Bangkok, and then another 2 hours, and you're at the bottom of the country and hitting Cambodia.
Wow. So have you felt a passion for this area for a long time, or is this something that's...
No, I've felt a passion for mission. I've felt a passion for mission in Asia because I'm at home in Asia. So as you'll see from my story, I've spent time there. I just love Asia. After coming out of London for 11 years, Asia's good. Australia was too legalistic for me, too strict. And everything, it's a bit like Singapore. It's a fine for everything, so to speak. Whereas Asia is a lot more where us humans are supposed to be. We can make decisions for ourselves. If you want to put 5 people on a motorcycle and not wear a helmet, the consequences of that could be devastating. So it's your decision.
So what's the missionary dream for you at the moment?
Changing the community and the environment that they're currently in at Pattaya. So Pattaya is a strange one, because it's full of old people. And so what it is, it's quite devastating.
So have you just picked a place that you're going to feel like the youngest guy there?
No, you're jumping ahead. But when I was on my knees, that's where it was all worked out with God. I said, take me to the worst place. in the world if that's what you want.
Yeah.
Because take me where no one else wants to go.
Sure.
That's what I said to God.
Yeah. Wow.
And I sort of felt myself going, should I have said that
Yeah.
immediately the moment I said that? But hey, it's Pattaya, so at least it's Thailand.
Yep.
And the good news is my wife comes from there.
Yeah.
So that sort of was sort of icing on the cake, because I'd already decided Pattaya was one of the areas that we were looking at previously.
wow.
And Vietnam and back in Malaysia.
Yep.
But they were too nice, because Vietnam, Malaysia is lovely.
That's right.
Malaysia
That's where you
is
go
my
for a
favourite
holiday.
country.
It's awesome. So you're gearing up. So 2022 is when you're looking to go in
Yes.
country.
Yeah, so what we've got to do, I've got jump back into studies now, so I've
Yep.
got to do, they're all at academic levels. I've got to do overview of the Old Testament, New Testament, theology, missiology, and all that. So 7 courses I've got to complete,
Nice.
and they reckon based on the completion and timeline of that, we'll sort of decide the date to go.
Yep.
So I actually haven't been sleeping since I've been sort of talking with Bob, and we've signed the paperwork and it's
Yep.
official. I've struggled to sleep because I'm so happy. I haven't been
Yeah.
so happy in such a long time.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. All right. We're going to come back to this, but things, because where you are now is a vastly different place from where you were.
Yes.
And I think that story is really cool and really important, because God's certainly taking you on a different pathway than I think what you anticipated to begin with. But if we go back to all those years ago here in Cairns, your mum's become a devout Mormon
Yes.
and follower of the church. You yourself,
Well,
part
I
of the
had
process.
to, because I was about 8 years old, and apparently when you're 8 years old, you can be baptized into the Mormon church. So I was with my 2 sisters.
but you were pretty passionate about it though, weren't you?
Do you know, when I had to write all this gumph that because I've been applying for certain mission organisations, I've had to write my bio and all that, and it was really helpful. So timing of this is good, because I've forgotten most of it. So it's fresh in my mind, because I've had to dig it all up.
Good for you. It means I've got great notes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what was the question again? We were.
You were pretty defensive of your Mormon faith at
That's
the
right.
time.
Yeah, I used to defend it because I think it was the evidence was there. My mum changed. My
Yep.
environment. I was no longer being abused.
Yep.
My sisters were no longer being abused. The environment changed completely to a strict Mormon environment. The Mormon elders, instead of taking in boarders, she would take in the elders too. So we would always have elders there. We'd always have the family home evenings, they called, and all these things would happen at our house. So it went from a life of debauchery to this peaceful house that had church meetings.
Yeah. Wow. And then, so that was your life role. You were part of the discipleship process through that as well.
Yeah, I was told to go to seminary,
Yep.
which you have to, and I hated it.
Yep.
I thought I would hate it.
Yep.
But coming through the final years of it, I've actually discovered that my entire life I've been in some sort of seminary with the Bible or false gospel
Sure.
through my life. So looking back through my bio, I'm thinking, wow,
Yeah.
I've done a lot of courses and training and been trained, and we've done a lot of things that didn't work, and we've done a lot of things that worked well, and we've done a lot of things where we know it was 100% him and not of us. So yeah, I've sort of covered the spectrum.
Now, there was a faithful trip to Sydney that changed a lot of things for you. How did all that come about?
Well, the very beginning was I had a cafe in Trinity Wharf at the time, and there was some Pommy backpackers, English backpackers, coming up the escalator. Now, I'm not a Christian. I'm a Mormon,
Sure.
not an active Mormon,
Okay.
right? God tells me, there's your wife. And all I could see coming up the escalator was this, she's not here, slightly overweight Pommy backpacker, because she's been living on peanut butter sandwiches for 3 months.
Right.
And, but I went like that.
Yep.
Anyway, so they came straight to the till, and they were asking a job, and we weren't hiring backpackers, particularly British backpackers, because they stole money from the till. I'm a truthful guy. I told them this.
No generalizations. But,
We
you
don't
know.
hire Pommy backpackers because you steal money out of the till. So we started fighting, and her friend really took me to task. And Alison, and they're best friends. Anyway, she was really angry and full of hatred towards me. And I wouldn't work for you even if you offered me a job. And I said, good. Anyway, the other one, Julia, I said, I can get you a job in the fish and chip shop. So I went and got her a job because we're all in it
Yep.
together, and I knew they were hiring. So she got a job there, and then eventually Alison got a job too. But it took nearly 10 years for Alison to finally, years later we got married and it still wasn't right. And it wasn't until about the first child, I think it was,
Really?
when Abby came along that Alison finally accepted me after all those years. Yeah.
So you've met this Pommy backpacker?
Yeah, and so we sort of got to know each other. I would ask her out on a date and she would say no. She was a Christian, born again Christian.
Yep.
And I just said it to be nice. I was a Mormon.
Yep.
My intentions weren't good. And so she was aware of that. And so she kept me at arm's length. So long and story short, she goes to Sydney. I collapse actually, which is, will tell me later on in life what it is with my kidneys.
Yeah.
But I collapsed after a hockey match, and
Yep.
everyone thought it was dehydration and all that. And I was urinating blood, and I was in hospital for 2 weeks. And so I don't know why, but my mum said, you told me to call Julia and tell her to come back because you really love her. I don't remember that. Anyway, so I gets out of hospital, and apparently this is what I'd done. And so I've booked a trip down to see her. So I fly down to spend 2 weeks with her on my holidays to get to know her and all that. And that's when it really went from 0 to 120 relationship-wise. I asked her, I think it was very quick. I was saying, look, I'm serious.
Yeah.
But that was the back end of the 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The start of the 2 weeks, I'm not Christian.
Yeah. So that's right. In amongst all of this relationship stuff, she asked you to go to church with her.
Yeah, and we had big arguments because Parramatta was playing St. George and I was in Sydney. And I was supporting Parramatta at that time because my cousins live in Parramatta. So I spent the afternoon with my cousins,
Yeah.
and they said, we're going to the footy as you do. And I
Yeah.
said, yes, we are. And she said, yeah, but we got church at 6 o'clock. And yeah, we'll be right. Where's it playing? Yeah, we'll get there. Anyway, as the game went on, a couple of beers, and didn't want to go to church. And so we're having this big argument. We're walking out of the stadium, and my cousin's walking that way off to the restaurant to have
Yeah.
a meal. I'm wanting to go with him, and she's walking that way saying, I'm going to church. And I'm and I started walking with my cousin.
Yeah.
And I literally felt, no, you don't. And then I just started walking, following her.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't talk to me much. Driving there. We got in the car park. I remembered I had the Book of Mormon in the back because I think I was even pushing her, if I go to this church, you come to the Mormon church. So I
Yep.
brought the Book of Mormon.
Mm.
Anyway, for some reason it was in the back seat. And it was late, 6 o'clock start. It was about 6:20.
Yep.
The music was going, I could hear it, and I've got dragged into this Sunday night church, and this blew me away because people are wearing clothes like this on Sunday nights,
Yeah,
because
sure.
I'm used to a Mormon church where you're suited and
That's
booted.
right.
So, that really, I struggled with that immediately.
Yeah.
But the music was overwhelming.
Mm.
It was overwhelming.
Yeah.
It instantly enveloped me, and I was home.
Yeah. Okay.
No one could talk to me. I
Yeah.
was just watching this heroin addict over in the front row praising Jesus. He
Yeah.
looked like the guy out of the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Nice.
Yeah, the bald-headed one, the butler, out of the Rocky
Oh,
Horror
yeah,
Picture
yeah.
Show.
Yeah.
Identical.
Really?
That guy. And I found out later he was past heroin addict.
Wow.
And in Sydney, at this church that was lively,
Yeah.
was full of people that I could see have had hard lives.
Yeah. Sure.
So it was real. And the worship, they were singing at the top of their lungs.
Yeah. Wow.
And somehow that was affecting me.
Yeah. So you say in your notes that you walked out of that church and you felt like a veil had been lifted.
Yeah, totally. Instantly.
Yeah.
And it was like I couldn't talk.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know why I went to the car park, but I had to get out of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I realized afterwards God took me to the car because I had to do something significant.
Yes.
And that was pick up that big Book of Mormon
Yeah. Yeah.
and just go, you telling me it's not true, Lord.
Yeah. Wow.
So I threw it down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, unbeknownst to you, Julia had a plan.
Yeah.
So the plan was for church that night, but then she'd also bought tickets.
She brought 2 tickets for the Doulos ship,
Yeah.
which
Now-
is Operation Mobilization.
Sure. So explain roughly the history of the Doulos ship.
Well, the Doulos ship has a long history. I think at the time it was the longest serving ship in the
Yeah.
seas
So it was the longest serving cruise ship ever,
ever.
and it had been bought by
And it's been in wars. It's been used as medical ships. It's been used as OM quite a lot for Christian work. And I think they did some medical stuff too later on after my time, because my time was 88, 89.
Yep.
So, yeah, amazing organisation that. And
Yeah.
they're in Thailand, in Bangkok. So that's good.
I mean, this was. I mean, I was talking to you a bit before off camera. I mean, I deep dove when you said that you were you went to the Doulos ship. I
Yep.
kind of deep dove a little bit and went down a bit of a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I mean, because I remember the ship. I remember being about 7 years old here in Cairns,
Yeah.
and the ship had docked, and we went, and there was a whole presentation and a spiel, and they had the bookshop that it was famous
Yep.
for, this Christian bookshop.
That's
But it
it.
was a phenomenal time, and I mean, deep diving. This was a ship that, even in its time serving the Lord, saw some crazy controversy. 1991, there was a grenade attack
Yes.
against the ship
right.
as they were,
Famous, yeah.
doing Jesus.
Yeah.
So anyway, but again, this rabbit hole, I get excited.
Yeah.
So you went to the ship.
She brought the tickets. At this stage, I'd changed inside, but not really understanding
Yep.
what had changed.
Yep.
And it was just a nice feeling,
Yep.
and like a peacefulness.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we this is interesting now, because now being a Christian, when you get tempted. I didn't know this at this stage, but my wife was being tempted previous to going to the Doulos, because we were to go to dinner and then go to the ship.
Yep.
And we actually went to the restaurant on the wharf, and the ship was there.
Yeah.
And so she decided to have a glass of wine. And then all of a sudden, she was sort of looking to me to say, can we just go out?
Yep. Sure.
And there was a moment there. In fact, I think we talked about it.
Yep.
And then there was a moment, and then it was, nah, let's go. You bought the tickets. Let's
Yeah.
go. And I can't remember if I said that or she said that, but anyway,
But
it
rather
turned
the Holy
out that
Spirit
I was
prompted
asking
something.
her to go up the gangplank.
Yeah. Wow.
Not her asking me.
Yeah.
So
wow.
it changed at that restaurant on that wharf
Yeah,
with the
sure.
ship out the window. You could see it through the window.
Yep.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Now you listening on that ship. I guess you had your moment.
I walked up the gangplank, everyone's smiling at me, and apparently they stick a name on your chest as soon as you get on there.
Yep.
So everyone's, Bruce, how are you? I'm going, do I know you? You're American. I haven't left Cairns. So anyway, all these friendly people, like over the top friendly.
Yep.
And for some reason, I just liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so there was a I guess a call to Christ, and you were pretty ready to embrace.
Well, that course, they called it Taking the Risk seminar.
Yep.
And that's what it was called. That was on the ticket. I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That excites me. So that's why I said, no, let's go for it. I'll take a risk, see what this is all about. And yeah, this guy started rattling off. It just has the usual. They'll usually have 3 or 4 testimonies from the young people who are serving on the ship. And they were good. But the third guy was me. But it wasn't me.
Yeah.
He was rattling off everything in my life.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was weird. So I connected on every level. And he just said at the end, if he led us to the salvation prayer. I didn't even know, but apparently I went, yeah, I'm having that. And then I stood up, and I was the first one to stand up.
Nice.
And it was like that. I was running,
Yeah.
and I didn't even know what I was running to, but it was good.
Yeah. Wow. So if we can jump forward a little, I mean, a lot happened in the next bit of time. You guys got engaged.
Yeah, Oh, let's talk the rest of that night.
Sure.
So I'm now born again
Yes.
and been given all this stuff. This feeling comes over me
Yes.
where Julia is no longer in that high of a priority in my life,
Yep.
because I've never had that void of love, the wholesome, beautiful love, filled and overflowing. It was
Yeah.
like being high.
Yeah, wow.
And it was like, I said to her, this love I have, I don't need it from you anymore. It was
That's
wholesome,
what
because
every
you've got
girl
to
wants to hear.
understand where I come
Yep.
from.
Yep.
Debaucherous background. You know, my childhood, I saw things I shouldn't have seen.
Yep.
And so my association with that, and possibly if I didn't become a Christian, my attitude towards women probably wasn't the best, or I
Yeah.
know it wasn't the best.
Sure.
And so, very weird. This love was pure. And I'm literally like, it's almost, because it's so vivid,
Yeah.
you can still remember it the day.
Yeah, wow. So what did your faith mean to you at this time?
It overtook me so much, I didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
But I was on a high for a few days.
Yep.
And we had a few more days left. The last day, I asked her, I took her down the back garden and I said, look, I'm serious. We've got a lot work to do in between, because you're going to be staying in Sydney. She was working for someone.
Yep.
And I had to go back. So I said, I would really like to ring your father and ask if you could be my wife. And so would you be engaged to me until I do that? And she freaked out because she had a boyfriend. I didn't know this.
Oh, good
A
grief.
Christian boyfriend. They both travelled out to Australia with the other lady. And he said, no, I'm going this way to do his bits, and she went to Sydney to do her bits.
Might have been a bit of regret in that decision.
Well, 6 months, 6 months, maybe 12 months, because they had a 2-year visa.
Yeah, wow.
And they hadn't seen each other for a long time.
Yeah.
And a phone call would come every 3 or 4 months. He was a rebel.
Yeah.
She was the Christian. She led him to the Lord.
Wow.
My first wife led so many people to the Lord.
Wow.
In boyfriends.
Yeah.
Every boyfriend, she led to the Lord and then dropped them.
Extreme
And then moved
witnessing.
on.
So, well, you didn't put that in your notes when you
no,
applied
well,
to
that's
GIA
about her.
being
But
yeah.
I was quite proud, because I always said that. I said,
Yeah.
you led me to the Lord.
Wow.
And she's so articulate when she was sharing the gospel, because we were going head to toe about Mormonism. And
Sure.
she didn't even know this. She told me years later, she didn't even know those scriptures she was quoting me.
Wow.
So God was after me.
Wow. I mean, you've sort of talked about a pivotal moment that's happened that really changed who you were. I mean, when you went from carrying what you carried from your childhood through abuse and improper relationship, and God showed you a glimpse of what pure relationship can be,
Yeah.
which informs then, I guess, the next chapter or so of your life. But so engaged, you fly home, and over the next few years, you
Within 6 months, we were married. I walked down the aisle on the 27th of January. I did that because it was the day after Australia Day, and I knew I would never forget my anniversary. So I chose the 27th of January. It was the middle of England's winter, and it was wet, cold, and miserable, so church was cheap.
Yep.
The wedding venues were cheap.
Nice.
So I left this country with $5,000 in my pocket and a suitcase.
Yeah.
And their parents paid for the wedding, and I paid for the honeymoon.
Wow.
That was it.
All right.
4X stubby shorts, remember them?
Yeah. You were married in those.
No, I went to England wearing them.
You went to England
and the
wearing
same
those.
safety shoes I have on today.
Wow.
And people used to laugh at me in the middle of winter. I'm in me top and 4X stubby shorts and a pair of thongs in the middle of England walking the dogs.
So that was the first impression her parents saw of you getting off the plane was nice.
Oh, and I had really long hair. And even worse, no beard, but a Magnum PI mustache. And even worse, curly.
You had a perm.
It got permed at one stage, but my hair's naturally curly.
You know
This was the
You know
80s.
you've just recorded something for posterity that says you got a perm.
This was the 80s.
intentionally.
I would say it was a tightening because I have ringlets already.
Okay. But we're talking about, 'cause I want to pause here for 2 seconds because money's come up a couple of times, and you said before you are an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That's who you are. I mean, right from the start, you were saying that your first job was as a brickies apprenticeship because you calculated that was the best way to make money.
Yeah. So St. Augustine's,
Yep.
the red building, just in from Victoria Street, I think, and that was being built at the time. I lived at 15 Grimshaw Street, so I had to walk home from school, and so I would do it all different ways because it wasn't good at home, so I walked and did all sorts of things. But anyway, when that building started, the brickies were there, and I just decided to sit in the shade on the grass and watch them. And then got talking to them over the days. I would visit them every day. And when I got confident enough, I asked them how much they were getting a brick, and then for the first time, I was willing to do homework. I pulled out a book, blank of course, because I never did my homework, and I counted every brick he laid, and by the time it was like hungry, ready to go home, I counted up and I asked him, and he said, "Yeah, that sounds about right." And then I said, I made a decision that day, I'm going to be a bricklayer.
Wow.
Because I could see that would be a vehicle for me to get out of my poverty.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you were saying before, at the age of 25 in Cairns, you had 2 different cafes.
2 different cafes, Trinity Wharf, Coney Island, and Palm Court, Coney Island.
Yeah, wow. I mean, risk-taking seems to be a big part of who you are.
Well, there's a background to that.
My
mum, who got into politics at that stage, and she, for my 21st birthday, going from a poverty background to where she finally broke through, all the kids had left, so it was just me. All of a sudden, she was earning good money. She brought me a ticket to 12 months airline ticket to go around the world when I was 21. And she did that for 2 reasons. One, she was retiring, so she was getting all her retirement payout. Secondly, so that was the gift to me. Secondly, I was in trouble at that stage, hanging around the wrong crowd. So at 21, 18, typical Cairns crowd, that non-church, because I wasn't in the Mormon church. So I would say Dire Straits and all that, sex, drugs and rock and roll back in those days, with all the concerts and that coming up here. So I was just a normal kid, and she brought it for me. I went around the world, and that's when my entrepreneurial eyes just were open. I had all these wonderful ideas from Paris, and man, I had such a wonderful time that year.
So
learning.
I mean,
I came back and opened up the cafes based on my experience from that trip.
Wow. I mean, that's huge. So from 91 to around 2000, you were in England.
Yes.
And in that time, you
89, I think it was.
Oh, yep, sure.
Yep.
So in that time, you really developed and grew as a Christian. I mean, I'm looking back through some of the things you've noted here.
Well, before we get there, the first 3 years of marriage was hell.
Sure.
Oh, it was horrible. I'm an Aussie, a bush kid from Cairns, North Queensland, and now I'm living in London, East London, middle class family. Man.
Yeah, wow.
So I was cultured, they call it, over there in that 11 years.
Wow.
Because I was pretty wild, rough around the edges. But some reason everyone was attracted to me because my get up and go. I seem to attract people who would say, "Man, you see things that," even you said it today. I just see things and I act on them.
So I mean, in that time though, I mean, you went through things like youth ministry, like as a leader. You were going through kids clubs and holiday programs. I mean, I love this here in. You did an event with probably one of my favorite bands of all time. Martin. So you did a youth event with Delirious.
Yeah, Martin's a good friend.
I mean, how was that for an experience?
Oh, mate. That was amazing. Because you know what I did?
No.
I told the church, well, God told me. God said, look, we need to break this curse. Because we had a curse in East London. The churches had a breakout when the Pentecostals came out and the Methodists and the Baptists all split. Because this movement, and then later, a couple of years later, the Toronto Blessings came into the fold. So East London had a history of falling out with each other. So churches were going lifetimes not talking to each other.
Wow.
And I couldn't understand that. And I wanted to do this event because I'm that sort of person. I also used to do events, fundraising events for hockey clubs or cricket clubs or whatever. So I used to say, well, why don't we do a concert? Because I fell in love with Delirious. Delirious music, the original albums, man.
King of Fools, man.
Oh,
is that not the greatest album?
Yeah. Amazing. So that really worked with me because Martin loves God.
Yeah.
And to have those lyrics that he comes up with, man, that give you such an intimate worship with him.
Yeah.
That's what I like about Delirious.
Yeah.
And Andrew, I think the drummer is, I can't remember his name. He was a good mate. He was the boss. The
Yeah.
drummer was the
Okay.
boss. And he was good, but great band. Anyway, so I said, look, I believe God is telling me we need to reunite the churches of Essex,
Yep.
East London, by doing an event.
Yep.
And every single one in the sort of had the history said it won't happen.
Yeah.
It won't happen. So I said, look, I know nobody, a bit like here.
Yeah.
I know nobody. I'm glad I don't have that history.
Yeah.
So give me the details
Yeah.
and leave it to me. So I rung them all up. So I told a lie. I said I had booked Delirious. And so what happened, because I was a new Christian, and I had to make it happen. So I said, I've got Delirious booked. We've got to do this amount. And my church says we can do it, and they'll underwrite it if we could get 2 or 3 more churches to come on board, bring their youth and all this sort of stuff.
Sure.
Anyway, I think it was Delirious.
Yeah.
Delirious was the bridge,
Yeah.
because exactly what you said was the reaction back in those days with
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
So here's a pastor saying their youth love Delirious and they want to be involved, and they're coming to Romford, Essex. Yeah, all right. So that was the bridge, I believe.
Wow.
So all of a sudden I got them to agree, and we're talking Church of England, we're talking the Methodists,
Yeah.
we're talking the other Baptists,
Yeah.
we're talking the community churches. So all these cross sections, you could see the families have been rotating around the churches over the decades. So
Yeah,
there's all
wow.
that history there.
Yeah.
Anyway, a couple of lively Christians in each church just took the vision
Yeah.
and said, Bruce, I want to join. What have I got to do to get onto the committee to help you?
Yeah.
So it was like that.
Wow.
So I just had so many people wanting to help. It turned out a breeze. So we had it in the sports centre,
Yeah.
the main hall with the basketball courts, and the kids were on the thing. The squash courts were all filled with different ministries praying for different things for the kids.
Yeah.
We had our dressing rooms and food in one as well. But seriously, there was constant prayer over the night.
Wow.
Dave Billsborough as well was the MC. He's famous over there. And for him and Delirious to be together is like, wow, this is
Huge.
big ticket stuff.
Yeah.
And Dave did a great job. He's a good friend too now. And man, 300 plus. I think it was, I can't remember, 315, 316,
Wow.
give or take a few souls. That's
Wow.
children,
Yeah. Yeah.
high school children.
Wow.
And these have never been churched like this before.
Yeah.
And so from there, we then took them camping as well. So we would
Nice.
take them down to Somerset and Devon every summer. One
Yeah.
of the school teachers on the committee said, look, now's my chance,
Yeah.
because these are all government schools,
Yeah.
non-church kids from East End, East Enders,
Yeah. Yeah.
that calibre of...
Wow.
So the East End of London type of people.
Yeah.
And so we were churching these kids in Devon and Somerset. They were the great years.
So, I mean, it's pretty crazy. I mean, in this time, you've also gone from being the knockabout Aussie kid who came off the plane with pluggers and footy shorts. By the time we sort of hit the late 90s, you're a pastor in the church.
Yeah.
You're also doing really well.
Delirious did that for me, I guess. Put me on the map.
One solid event is all it takes.
It's like a song, eh? You write a good song and you can make money from it for the rest of the year of life. Yeah.
So in all this time though, but in your professional world, things are going really well for you as well.
Oh, amazing.
And you're going from strength to strength. And in 2000, you go to Asia.
Asia.
I mean, that was...
Yeah, you've missed all my growth though. But in the 11 years
yeah.
of London, I grew and grew and grew and grew.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to be a Christian in the British environment. Was very hard.
Sure.
It's actually harder to witness to a person in England than it is in Australia.
Yeah?
I would say England's the worst country to witness to someone.
Why is
Because
that?
it's staunch religious ideas and conversations are deeply personal, and you do not broach those subjects
Yeah.
in public. Or
Wow.
yeah, so that's the culture of England.
Yeah.
Very reserved, sweep it under the carpet, don't talk. So it was very difficult to try and get the British to witness to themselves.
Yeah.
It was hard for me because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I hadn't really done it for real.
Yeah.
And so to a British person, and so that was the hardest thing
Yeah.
to do, and to overcome that through Alpha was the breakthrough for us.
Yeah,
so
right.
Alpha helped me tremendously and equipped me for the senior leadership and then Asia.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know we're glossing a little bit fast over this
Yeah,
next
of course.
period, but, in Asia, I think, again, when I go through your story, where do you think the two biggest areas of personal development were in that period that you were in Singapore? And
Kuala Lumpur first.
Yep.
Yeah, so the development didn't come. I was polished by,
Okay.
you don't get those jobs
Yeah, sure.
as full expat status, $250,000 a year tax free. You don't get that sort of job unless you're polished.
Yep.
So I'm already polished
Yep.
commercially.
Yep.
I'm a robot.
Yep.
So I went through the business training with Rentokil Initial. They had their own business university, so I did all my management training through them. So by the time I was headhunted to Asia, I was a robot. I was polished in every facet of business.
Yep. Wow. And then eventually we come back to Australia.
Went to Singapore because the planes hit the building, and I was in Kuala Lumpur at the time. And here's an experience. The day that they hit, we were having cell group. And so we stopped and watched because it was night time for us. And the next day, there was so many festivities in the streets, I could not drive. And I got caught in one near, because I lived in between the American embassy and the British embassy. And guess what happens every Friday? The Muslims come out and do their protests in front of them. So I was driving through one of these, but today it was festivities and festival-like atmosphere.
Wow.
That really
Yeah,
shocked
yeah.
me to the bone
Wow.
to see the joy on those people's faces of what happened the
So-
night before.
How do you reconcile that then?
It was tough. I had a tough week because so my lifestyle is I'm constantly going to the travel agent. I have my own travel agent, but for whatever reason, I visited her that day to organise the next week's trips, I lived 3 weeks in advance, so planning those trips. They wouldn't come and serve me because they were celebrating and the party was so loud that when they finally said, "Oh, Mr. Jones Walker's here," or Mr. Bruce, they call me in Asia.
Yeah.
And so she came out, so happy. And it was about the buildings. And she goes, "I know you're happy too because you're Aussie, not American."
Wow.
So that was an eye-opener for me. I learnt a lot those few days.
Because even in this time that you're there, I mean, you're
It's an
heavily
Islamic
involved
country
in
too.
Yeah, I mean, you're still heavily involved in church in this time, though.
And the other one.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Wow. Wow.
Mm.
So again, sorry.
So it does wake you up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
The joy on their faces to
Yeah.
see the destruction of those two twin towers
Yeah. Wow.
woke me up.
So does that influence? I mean, I'm jumping ahead
Yes.
here, but does this influence how you feel about Asia in terms of missional work?
Yes. There's more people in Asia than our country, and most, they're so lost.
Yeah.
They go to, even the Muslims will still visit witch doctors. The witch doctor is still all powerful. Alternative medicines, alternative ways of doing stuff. Voodooism is
Yeah.
there in this part of Thailand.
Yeah.
So there's consequences where I've had to pray for young boys and things have come out of their gut where witch doctors stuck a stick in his gut and I've pulled it out. What's this? And it's a stick, a twig, because it's supposed to do whatever it was that he went to see the doctor for. How do you deal with that? When you know you got the truth, how do you deal with that stuff? And the only way to deal with that's true love. We often misinterpret in developed worlds.
Yeah.
We're all nice to each other. We put our masks on when we come to church and be pleasant.
Yeah.
Even if we don't feel like it, we'll tell you we're okay. Over there, they're real. When they come to the Lord, not only do their whole lives change, usually the families come, but they want to do church 7 days a week.
Yeah. Wow.
And they don't understand the concept of a Sunday celebration.
Wow.
Church every day. because they live their Buddhist or their Muslim lives every day.
So how does that make you feel then? I mean, spending time, I mean, you were part of one of the biggest churches in Brisbane, and then being part of the churches here. How does that make you feel? How do you reconcile that version of faith against what you see in the Western church?
That's why, my ministry, my personal ministry is called Be True to One Another. So that is my DNA. That's who I am. Be true to one another doesn't mean be polite.
Yeah.
I'm in your face because I want you in heaven.
Yeah.
And if you want to muck around with that,
Yeah.
then I'll move on to the next person.
Yeah, sure.
Because, that's what we're called to do. We are running out of time.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of Christians out there that have families and half families and extended families not saved. So we've got a job to do.
Yeah. I'm going to condense this next bit for a second because I really want to get to where you are now, but something very pivotal happened. So you came back to Australia after that time overseas, and, again, you worked in churches, you were doing mentor and development stuff with churches as well as in the business world.
Yes.
I mean, you said, we were talking off air and you were saying that, there was a sort of a cycle of boom and bust for you where things would go really, really well financially, and then it would bust out, but always, and on that cycle. But you went through a really tough point where the marriage broke down.
So we're back in Australia now. And on the Sunshine Coast. And the marriage broke down simultaneously around the same time I was diagnosed with a life-threatening disease at the time.
Yeah, that's right. So this disease is something that you talked about it back in the day. You fell apart after a hockey game. So you have an ongoing kidney issue.
Yeah, IgA nephritis. If I've said that right, but that's how I've been saying it.
Sounds good to me.
My disease. Anyway, so apparently I've got that. Yeah. And so that is not from my mum taking Bex powders or Vincent powders, which is originally what they thought. Sure. So after the biopsy and all the tests, it's just a gene that I've got, luck of the draw. Yeah. And it also was the reason I collapsed 4 times previous to that date throughout my life, which no one could understand why, apart from maybe dehydrated or whatever. And the same thing, protein in your urine. So everything's the same. When I'd get a flu or bronchitis when I was a kid, urine in my blood in my urine. So I've lived with it all my life. They even thought, was it TB back in the early days? There was a scare here where they did a spinal tap. Yeah, okay. They did that to me as well. I remember that on one of the times. So anyway, it turned out that I got a kidney disease. Yeah, wow. And I had, at that stage, I was 136 kilos. I had less than 5 years to live, and they would refuse to operate if I didn't change my lifestyle.
Wow.
I was a fat CEO cat.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a hard question, if I may. You've had a pretty epic journey with the Lord and in your work. You've had a marriage that you've enjoyed. It's had 2 amazing kids.
26 years, beautiful.
And then you receive a diagnosis for an ongoing condition, which could potentially be fatal. At the same time, you and Julia separate.
Yes.
What happens to Bruce the Christian? What happens to Bruce the person in that time?
Well, I'll tell you the truth, because I think it's important leadership are truthful about their own walk. It was a very difficult time. So I locked myself away for 3 weeks. I wasn't a drinker, but I was, because when a CEO goes to lunch, he has a glass of wine. And then that night, all of a sudden, you're in a restaurant or a pub having a meal, and it's a beer or a glass of wine. So when you add up how much alcohol, I was a commercial drinker, but never drunk at home unless it was a weekend or a holiday or whatever. So from that point of view, I brought a bottle of rum, because up here, as a kid, I went back to 18. I brought a bottle of rum and Coke, and I drank it. And that's all I did. 3 weeks later, in that 3 weeks was pretty dark, but I was dealing with the crisis at hand and making a decision on what am I to do. to get, one, my children safe and secure.
Mm.
Two, separate, because don't forget the Jones Walkers, and I say the Jones Walkers, Julia and Bruce, we did everything in the community.
Yep.
Church leaders, we were the festival coordinator for the village,
Yep.
Mumbai, everything. The army would use us because we used to hold street events, so they would ask us if we'd hold it and give us an opportunity to promote the church. The pub would work with us, so we had the pub, we had the light horse brigade, we had the council, and we had because villages around the Sunshine Coast, the bank, the IGA, and the business owners, the big business owners have some sort of committee, and so we worked with them and was on that committee. And so when that marriage fell apart, it was more devastating for our church than it was for Julia and myself. It was very difficult because Julia and I, we make decisions and act upon them.
Yeah.
But the church fell apart in the sense of, because church leadership, the pastor and that. But the most important thing was, I used to believe it when they used to say the Jones Walkers, because our two kids, we were like this, and so I missed that. I missed that. But kids grow up.
Yep.
They left uni, and that was the time my wife took the decision to exit the marriage.
Yep. So you said you were in a pretty dark place for a long time. You talked to me off air. You said that it was a real wilderness time for you.
Yeah, never left God.
Sure.
In fact, He kept me, and we'll get to that point shortly. But I was never angry at God. And a lot of people used to misdiagnose my wilderness experience, that I was like the prodigal son.
Sure.
Obviously, there was a little bit of that. Been married for 26 years, good and faithful husband, and all of a sudden you're single. I'm not in a church. I'm an outcast because I can't go to church.
Yeah.
I took a decision not to stay in the Sunshine Coast because all our friends were couples and families, and my ex-wife staying there. So I could not put my friends, could not put the church through that. So I disappeared.
So, I mean, look, that's a big thing, I think, for anybody that goes through these sorts of things. I watched it in my parents when their marriage came apart as well. But I think there's a real sense, if you're now separated from your partner in life for 26 years, who, like you say, you've been all over the world with and made crazy decisions
Blessed
with.
life, beautiful life.
That's now been separated. As a result, you were separated from your church as well.
Yes.
Which, by your own volition was partly by choice, but partly you didn't feel you had an option.
That's what I believe.
Yeah.
Whether it's theologically correct.
Yeah.
I could not go through a marriage separation while in office.
Sure. No, that's
Full stop.
completely legitimate.
So I would expect the same of a pastor in my church.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
I
Sorry, I mean
same.
that's sorry. I guess to me that's a bit of a given, and that was the right decision.
Yeah.
I mean, being removed from that community as well. That's your family that you're being
Missed
removed from.
Missed them. Still.
So, I mean, dealing with that, anybody would feel a real sense of isolation in that time.
Yeah.
Like, how did the Lord take you through this process?
Okay, the isolation period. So that's why COVID didn't affect me, because I've been isolated for 5-6 years.
Sure.
So there you go. That's it. There was a victim mentality there for a period. See, there's so much in that first year or two I can't remember.
Yep.
Because of my mental health at that time. My brother, who lives up here still, and my sister, who was dying of cancer at the time, he was caring for her. My brother's a carer. He's out of the Air Force, and he had cancer, and she looked after him because they're both divorced, and then he looked after her, and then I turn up. So the three of us are living in a house somewhere at the back of Edmonton there.
Yeah.
And it was a house where one was in recovery, one was dying, and then you got me turning up. So it was, but we loved it.
Yeah.
We caught up with each other.
Yeah.
We, all those years, because I was overseas for so long and hadn't been back in Cairns for 30 odd years. So, that 2 years, I felt like I was home with my mum and my brothers and sisters. And my sister, my older sister, would say, "I'm not your mother." And I go, "Oh no, but you look like her. And you're old. And you look after me." And so she hated it, but she was good. She's passed, but they all became Christians through my walk.
Wow.
Yeah, so all of them, bar my eldest brother,
Sure.
have come to the Lord.
Wow.
Half of them out of Mormonism into Christianity, and the ones that didn't go through the Mormon bit straight to Christianity.
Yeah. What for those people that are feeling isolated in their own journeys, whether it be through relationship breakdown or simply just being removed from family, what would you, looking back at your time now where you've come to, what would you advise them? How would you disciple that process or mentor that process?
The obvious answer is to read your Bible.
Sure.
But and these people will know this, to actually pick up your Bible and read it is difficult. It took me close to possibly 2.5 years. And but it was a decision that I was making throughout that 2.5 years. I want to get back into the Word because I'm feeling crap. I wanted to experience in a weird way what it was like to be lost. Not me lost, but I wanted to learn the language of the lost.
Sure.
Because I realized through this, well, there's so many, 101 different things came out. One of them was I had surrounded myself by too many Christians.
Sure.
And that came out in the wilderness. So I wanted to learn the language of the lost so I could communicate more effectively in stealth-like mode.
Sure.
So from this day forth, I will not tell people I am a Christian or born again. I'm just going to love them and help them. And so I joined
you won't tell
Oz
people
Harvest.
you're a Christian, you'll just be a Christian.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I did it through Oz Harvest, and I still do it to this day. Oz Harvest is a wonderful organisation.
Yeah.
I've always, it's funny, you know, because in my darkest period, I had to find a charity.
Yeah.
I think it's my brain. That's how I work.
Sure.
I have to be active, and I've got this inbuilt community thing because of I don't know why, but I've got to be doing something for the community. I'm designed that way. I'm designed for that.
So can I ask you then the flip side of that? I mean, for those of us that are church members, family, brothers, neighbors,
Yes.
when we see people going through those times, how can we respond? What's the best way for us to respond to that? And what's the best way for us to...
Yeah, it's a hard
be
one
Christ?
because you've got all these gimmicks, and there is lots of gimmicks. Are you okay? And all this sort of stuff.
Yep.
But I tell you the truth. If you're walking the walk, you'll know.
Sure.
And that's it. You know, I can give you countless stories of where I'm walking in the street and God tells me to go back and talk to someone I didn't even see.
Yeah.
And I go back and they're sitting on the chair. And I'll tell you one good story, okay?
Sure,
This
sure.
is London. We've just come out of Malaysia
Yep.
on our 3-week holiday to London.
Yep.
I had a bit of business to do as well, so a day. But first day, Christmas, we're back with the family, back with the old church.
Yep.
So excited. And it's my first day, and I'm playing cricket in Malaysia. And don't get me started on that because I love my cricket. But the thing is, I'm buying all my cricket gear in London to take back to Malaysia. So I'm buying myself a new bat, new pads. This is me.
Yep.
My kids are being dragged. And my missus is being dragged. I've got to get my cricket gear. Nothing else happens until I get my cricket gear. So anyway, we're walking along, and I think I was in Brentwood, East London somewhere, and come out of the car park, walk into this sports shop, and this giant, big black dude, seriously, basketballer, 6'8".
Yeah.
You know when you sit on a 2 or 3 seat in the streets, he's taking half of it by sitting like this.
Sure.
And so he's huge.
Yeah.
And I'm walking past, and I literally, again, because I'm slow, so God has to yell it out sometimes, and picks me by the ear, turns me around. And my children said, because they're used to me doing this.
Yep.
And what do you see, Dad? Abby said. I said, God's just told me there's someone back there I've got to go and talk to. And she said, it's that big black man. Oh, okay. So I went and sat down. And I sat next to him, and he didn't even move. He was just crinched like this,
Yeah.
suited and booted,
Yeah.
looked brilliant. And I just said to him, "G'day, mate," in my Aussie accent.
Yeah.
And he looked at me like that. And I said, "You okay?" And he went, staring at me. And he cried, started crying. He says, "No, mate." I go, "What's wrong?" "Everything. But my wife thinks I've still got a job. I haven't been employed for the last 8 weeks, and I don't know where I'm going to get the money from now." So that's why, isn't it? God got me to share a few scriptures. They just come. Prayed for him in the street. I have no fear praying for people in the street, because that's the witness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you see him happy, what does it tell the other people?
Yeah. Sure.
So that's the best witness, to
Yeah,
pray
wow.
for people in public. Prayed for him, gave him a hug, then went on and brought my cricket gear.
That's right.
But it's those opportunities
Yeah.
through life. If you're walking the walk,
Yeah.
I know there are hurting people in our church. I know there are hurting people all across this city, and I can see them. And my heart cries out because Jesus crying for them. And so it's that mercy. It's that merciness, and whether I'm trained, because I'm trained as a profiler, because I couldn't learn all the different languages in Asia, so I took profiling instead, and that helped. And whether that's
Yep.
part of it, where I can see people and know that there's something wrong or not right, and it could be a simple little thing.
Yep.
But what I get here, the problems here in Cairns are very different to the problems overseas
Yeah. Yeah.
in Asia.
Yeah.
And that's the bit I'm getting used to.
All right. For time reasons, I'm going to call this in very, very shortly. I don't want to, but
Do part 2.
we'll do a part 2. I have, I guess, 2 things I want to ask
Yeah.
you. The first one is, when we stopped, you were still in that wilderness place. I mean, you voluntarily and rightly so took yourself out of ministry
Yes.
in that time. What was the moment, or what happened in your life, or how did God tell you, or what was the moment that you went, I'm ready to get back into ministry?
Yep. 31st of October, which is very soon, I believe.
It is.
Was the day my wife and I separated.
Yep.
I waited through that 3 weeks dealing with the divorce and the abandonment issues. I was contemplating suicide from about early December, but it was more of an honourable thing as
Sure.
opposed to a
Desperation.
desperation cry for help. I was insured for a lot of money, $2.5 million, and this is my makeup. This is how I think. Once you take my role as a husband and a father away, that's when I discovered all those company titles meant nothing. And to be honest, the church titles meant nothing either. None of it. So for me, it was to ensure my children would be equipped for the future, because I was struggling because I was such a believer of the Jones Walkers. And so when that disintegrated, my daughter was in South Africa at the time, diving with great white pointers without cages, because that's what we do. We're shark divers as a family. I couldn't wait till they're old enough to learn scuba diving. And so I've taken them shark diving all different places around the world. So she's shark diving on her own now because she's an adult. And she's doing great whites at Cape, whatever it is, in South Africa.
Yeah.
And she had a breakdown over there because of the marriage breakdown. And she told me, so I decided not to commit suicide till she got back.
Wow.
Because I wanted to console her. And so she got back late January, which was hard because I made the decision in early December. So for 8 weeks you're living with this lie, and I couldn't sleep at night. I was probably sleeping 3 hours a night. I've always slept. I've always slept. I could sleep on a plane, on a bench, in an airport, in a bed.
Yeah.
I always sleep. When I have sleepless problems, it's usually a one-off. But I was lacking sleep through all this time because of this lie. That's the perfect way to finish it. You pay, the kids will get $1 million each. You can pay, because I closed all my businesses down suddenly, so you've got to pay contractors, suppliers and stuff, spend the other bit on that, and my wife wasn't going to get a penny. And so I think that was out of the hurt and all that, and I had to go through that. So anyway, the lie got stronger and stronger, and then I made up excuses not to do it after Christmas, because most suicides happen around Christmas. Because my son's birthday in January, I wanted to, then I started making excuses now. Oh, there's an event, I'll do it after that. I'll do it after that. I'll do it after that. Then it got to, there's no after that. So we're now mid-February. And so I'd done my Google research, how to hang yourself and all that sort of stuff, how to use the right rope, make sure you're right stool, make sure whatever you're tying it to. For me, it was a Queenslander, the old postmaster's house and solid beams. And so the night it happened, I lost time, but I believe, because my brother tells me it was 2 o'clock in the morning at the time I spoke to him. So I got up on my chair, I believe it would have been about 11 or midnight-ish, contemplating, getting everything ready, and then sitting down. And I remember just going, this is it. And I had to remind myself why I was doing it. And so what I did was I got up on the chair. And previously I'd rung my brother. Don't know why, but I did. And for some reason, as I got up on the chair, I held first voice, which says, Bruce, if you want to die, come and work for me. Die for me. And then instantly after that, the phone rang. And it was that clear voice. I've heard God's, you know when God's talking to you.
Yeah.
And I do remember saying, yeah, but what about my kids? What about the money? And he just didn't answer me. And never heard a response. So it was all me. It was me, hurt, me, all that, creating all these lies and stuff, and the enemy jumping on board, having a go. But so the phone rang. I got down off the stool. I picked up my phone, and it was my brother. And then I was, blah! And then somehow he said, come home, and voila.
Yeah, wow.
I think I was drinking that night.
Yeah.
Well, I know I was. So I had more drinks, and I went to bed, woke up, and I found the stool and the rope still there in the morning.
Wow.
And that woke me up. And all of a sudden, I had this strategy. I had a purpose now, and that was to get to Cairns. Didn't know what was going to happen next. So I didn't realise till long after that, because don't forget the first 2 years is a blur.
Sure.
Because I laying in my bed looking at the ceiling for days on end, watching the sun go up, sun go down. And so the real thing is this. That reminded me of when I first got married. My first marriage, we got married to go to the mission field in Beira, Mozambique.
Wow.
We were so in love with Mozambique and Beira, and it was really bad back in those days, like worse than probably recent history.
Sure.
Mozambique was really bad, very dangerous. So we went there, church wouldn't let me. So my desire to be on the mission field has been almost since we've been married.
Yeah.
But when God told me that at that point, it all made sense. Because I actually don't want to be a corporate dog. Sure. I actually didn't like doing business. The title and the lifestyle and all that was good. But it was a conflict inside me.
Yeah.
So I devoted my business and corporate life to fund my Christian life.
Yeah,
I took a decision, and that's why I was self-funded all the way through.
Good.
And for the church in Asia, I managed to convert other expats to do the same. Because you get lots of money over there, so put it into God's work. Yeah, and that's when the church flew in Kuala Lumpur. So, for me, I believe that this call from that night was a reaffirmation of the original call when we first got married, because we believed we were getting married to go to the mission field.
Mm-hmm.
It was affirmation that I could do good and still die. So I decided to become a serious Christian and die to self every day.
Wow.
And that's why I'm a little bit unique and weird to the rest of us, because I've seen too many miracles. I've seen God move too much. I've seen a lot of dark stuff where God has just pierced it. I have a childlike faith. I pray I never lose that.
Yep.
I pray I have, but it's still more childlike than most average humans. I have a childlike expectation of what the Word teaches me.
Yep.
And I find now, the last 3 years of studying the Bible, I went back, because obviously I did Bible college at City Point in Brisbane, and then it wasn't alive like it is now.
Yep.
So now I'm studying the Bible. The Bible is coming so alive that it compels you to serve more.
Yeah.
And this is what I was saying at the AGM. What I'm finding these last 3 years of self-study, as well as joining online courses, and now I'm going through the whole thing again officially, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Because I've made a decision, my work and my job no longer is any priority to me. My titles, no priority. And I've learnt to live on my own, and I've learnt to live without all the money.
Yeah.
And I love it. I'm the happiest I've ever been. And I'm so excited about this calling. And it's like me running. I'm running to this calling with excitement, not with fear and trepidation. Now, I've got to raise a lot of money, and that'll come, no doubt. But the thing is, I am pumped.
Yeah.
And it's a peaceful pumped.
Yeah. Awesome.
You know, it's not Brucey the ego or Brucey who can do it in the natural.
Yeah.
This is a godly pumped.
Awesome.
Because I constantly keep getting affirmations
Yeah.
that I'm a good and faithful servant, and I'm going to be a good and faithful servant for my Jesus.
So good. Bruce, we're going to finish there.
Yeah.
Because we're going to do this again, I'm pretty sure, before you leave. I'm sure we'll have a part 2 where we're going to talk a little bit more about it. And we're going to talk about how we're going to partner with you through prayer and how we can do it differently. And
I'm excited about the future with this church.
And be excited. But look, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, it's a story that changes and is challenging in and of itself. But it's brought you to where you are and who you are now. And I'm certainly excited to see the next, 12 months for you as you prepare to hit the field.
Yeah.
So God has been good to you. It's not that it's been easy the whole time.
No.
But God has been very good. And I'm excited about your excitement, man.
Well,
It's
I brought this chapter today, which is gratitude. 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18. Rejoice evermore, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. So I've lived through some significant crises, including life-threatening. I've also been involved in other crises. But I tell you, that verse has carried me all the way, singing praises and giving thanks, regardless of the circumstances. And one more to finish. Always say, good night, Jesus. And then in the morning, always say, good morning, Jesus, when you wake up. If you do those 2 things, I guarantee your life will transform, because what will happen is you'll want to read more, you'll want to study more, and then life from the Word comes in. So you got the Holy Spirit and you've got the Word connecting in here. Wow. Every day's a joy.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us tonight. I trust you enjoyed the conversation. And if you would like to know more, again, you can find those on YouTube. Just search Cairns Baptist in YouTube and you'll find our channel there and find our back catalogue. Can I encourage you, if you heard something tonight that you're struggling with, or if you're dealing with your own thoughts around issues of suicide and depression, can I encourage you to seek someone out? We'd love to talk to you here at the church. There are plenty of other people. Find a friend, someone to speak to through these times. May you have an amazing week. May God bless you, and know that Jesus loves you very, very much.